The crack in the wall started as a whisper. A hairline fractured in the translucent quartz that made up the eastern wing of the spire. It wasn't caused by an earthquake or a structural defect. It was caused by a shout. In the city of Vitrili, emotion was not merely a feeling, it was a kinetic force. The architecture, forged from singing crystal and resonant glass, was breathtakingly beautiful but terrifyingly fragile. A heavy footstep of frustration could spiderweb a staircase, a scream of rage could bring down a ceiling. Here, the ability to remain unbothered wasn't just a social skill, it was a survival instinct. Elara was a mender. Her hands, perpetually dusted with fine silica powder and scarred by tiny nicks, were responsible for healing the city's wounds. She spent her days suspended on scaffolding, applying liquid resin to the fractures left behind by the city's collective stress. She was the best in her guild, renowned for her ability to smooth over the jagged edges of broken facades until they looked new again. But while she fixed the external damage, her internal foundations were crumbling. Elara was angry. She was angry at the wind that howled incessantly through the chimes of the upper towers. She was angry at the selfishness of the nobles who lived in the Cloud District, stomping their feet in petulant fits that sent tremors down to the workers' quarters. But most of all, she was angry that she had to care. Every rude comment from a passerby, every shove in the crowded market, every dismissal from her superiors stuck to her like tar. She absorbed it all, storing the vibrations deep within her chest, terrified that if she let it out, she would shatter the very world she was sworn to protect. The morning the incident happened, the air in Vitria was thick with humidity and tension. Elara was commissioned to repair the Grand Oculus, a massive lens in the center of the council chamber. It was delicate work, requiring absolute stillness. "You're doing it wrong," a voice grated behind her. Elara didn't turn. She knew the voice. It belonged to Valerius, the High Architect. He was a man who seemed to take up more space than his body physically occupied, his presence a constant, grating noise. He was the type of person who found problems where there were none, simply to hear his own authority echo. "The resin mixture is too thick," Valerius continued, stepping onto the scaffolding. The metal groaned under his heavy, careless stride. "Art will cloud the refraction. Are you incompetent or just lazy?" Elara felt the heat rise up the back of her neck, a familiar boiling sensation. Her hand, holding the delicate brush, trembled. "Just a fraction. Ignore him," she told herself. "Don't let him bother you. Be like stone. I am following the standard ratio, High Architect," Elara said, her voice tight, squeezed through a clenched jaw. "The humidity today requires a denser bind." "Don't talk back to me, girl," Valerius snapped, stepping closer. The vibrations of his voice hit the crystal pane she was working on, causing it to hum with a low, dissonant tone. "I've built spires that scraped the heavens while you were playing in the mud. Start over. Scrap the batch." He reached out and, with a dismissive wave of his hand, knocked the pot of expensive, rare resin off the railing. It fell 300 feet, smashing onto the plaza below with a sound like a gunshot. The sound echoed, but the silence that followed was louder. Elara stared at the empty space where her work had been. Hours of preparation, weeks of sourcing materials, gone in a second of one man's arrogance. The vibration in her chest wasn't a hum anymore, it was a jackhammer. Every slight she had ever endured, every time she had bitten her tongue, every time she had forced a smile at a rude client, it all rushed to the surface. She looked at Valerius. He was smirking, waiting for her to apologize, waiting for her to shrink. She didn't shrink. "You," she whispered, and the air around her seemed to warp. "Excuse me," Valerius raised an eyebrow. "You arrogant, small, destructive fool," Elara screamed. The reaction was instantaneous. The sonic force of her rage didn't just leave her throat, it slammed into the Grand Oculus. The massive lens, which had withstood storms and centuries, didn't just plotted. Thousands of shards of priceless history rained down. The scaffolding lurched violently. Valerius stumbled back, his face pale with shock, grabbing a support beam. Elara stood amidst the falling glitter of destruction, her chest heaving, her eyes wide. She had finally let it out, she had reacted. And she had destroyed everything. The aftermath was a blur of shouting guards, the horrified gasps of the council, and the terrifying sound of the alarm bells ringing throughout Vitria. Structural failure in Sector 1. Elara was stripped of her guild badge, but the dust had even settled. She was branded a resonator, a danger to the stability of the city, exiled. By sunset, Elara found herself walking the path to the Rustlands, the jagged periphery of the city where the broken glass was dumped. It was a graveyard of sharp edges and failed potential. The sky here was a bruised purple, and the ground crunched under her boots. She was exhausted, but the anger hadn't left. It had only curdled into shame. She sat on a pile of discarded obsidian. burying her face in her hands. She had failed. She had let one person, one insignificant man, control her emotions so completely that she lost her livelihood. Why couldn't she just let it go? Why did everything bother her so deeply? It is a heavy thing, carrying the weight of other people's storms. A voice rasped. Elara jumped, reaching for a shard of glass as a weapon. Emerging from the shadows of a twisted sculpture made of scrap metal and fused silicon was an old man. He looked nothing like the pristine citizens of Vitria. His robes were tattered, woven from coarse fibers, and his skin was weathered like old leather. But his eyes were clear, terrifyingly calm, like the surface of a deep, windless lake. "Who are you?" Elara snapped, her defenses instantly up. "I have nothing to steal, go away." The old man chuckled, a dry sound like shifting sand. "I have no need for your possessions, child. I was merely admiring your frequency. You ring very loudly, it must be painful. You don't know anything about me." Elara spat. "I'm a mender, or I was." "Thou? You were a dam," the old man corrected gently. He sat down on a jagged rock, seemingly unbothered by the sharp edges. "You spent your life holding back the water. It is no surprise the dam finally broke. That is the fate of all dams eventually. So what was I supposed to do?" Elara stood up, pacing furiously, kicking at the shards of glass. "Let him walk all over me. Let him destroy my work." "I stood up for myself, I got angry." "And look where it brought you." The old man gestured to the wasteland around them. "You are here, in the garbage." He is likely still in the tower, eating grapes and complaining about the draft. Who was punished, truly, him, or you? Elara stopped pacing. The truth of his words hit her harder than any physical blow. Valerius was fine. She was the one in ruins. "It's not fair," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Fairness is a construct of the mind," the man said. "Physics is the law of the world. Action and reaction. He offered you a poison. You drank it, hoping he would die." Elara looked at the old man, tears stinging her eyes. "I don't know how to stop. Everything gets to me. The noise, the rudeness, the injustice. I feel it all. I'm not made of stone." "Good." The old man smiled, revealing gap-toothed wisdom. "Stone cracks, stone erodes. You must not try to be stone, Elara. You must learn to be the wind." He reached into the folds of his robe and pulled out a strange object. It was a complex arrangement of hollow glass tubes, suspended on a frame. A wind chime, but far more intricate than any she had seen in the city. "In Vitria they teach you to suppress," he said. "To build walls so the vibration cannot enter. But the stronger the wall, the harder the impact when it is hit. I am the keeper of the hollows. I can teach you the way of the open channel. But it requires you to unlearn everything you know about strength." Elara looked back toward the glittering spires of the city that had rejected her, then at the strange, calm old man sitting amidst the sharp wreckage. She had nowhere else to go. Her anger was a fire that was consuming her, and she was out of fuel. "Teach me," she said. "Teach me how to not shatter." The old man nodded slowly. "First, you must understand that the noise is not the enemy. The enemy is your resistance to it." He stood up and walked over to a large, flat pane of glass that was stuck upright in the ground. He picked up a heavy rock. "Watch," he said. He threw the rock with significant force at the glass pane. It hit the center with a sickening crunch, spiderwebbing the surface instantly. "This is you," he said. Rigid, proud, resisting the end moved to a second frame. This one didn't hold a solid pane of glass. Instead, it held hundreds of thin, vertical glass rods. Hanging freely, side by side, they formed a curtain. "Now watch." He threw a second rock just as hard, at the curtain of rods. The rock struck the glass. But instead of shattering, the rods swung back. They parted, allowing the rock to pass through them, clinking musically as they danced in the air, before settling back into perfect stillness a moment later. The rock landed harmlessly in the dirt behind him. "The rock is the insult," the old man whispered. "The rock is the anger of another. If you are a wall, you break. If you are the open air, the rock passes through you, and you remain whole." The Lara stared at the swaying rods. It seemed impossible to let the attack in, to let it pass through. It went against every instinct she had. "Tomorrow," the old man said, turning back to his hovel, "we begin the training. We will see if you are brave enough to be nothing." Elara stood alone in the darkening rustlands, the wind picking up, whistling for the mountains of broken glass. For the first time in her life, she wasn't trying to brace herself against the gale. She was wondering what it would feel like to let it blow right through her. The training was not what Elara expected. She expected meditation under a waterfall, or perhaps complex breathing exercises to slow her heart. She did not expect the tapping. For 3 days, the keeper of the hollows, whose name, she learned, was Kalen, did nothing but sit across from her and tap a small silver spoon against the rim of a cracked glass jar. Tink. Tink, tink, the rhythm was irregular. Just when Elara's brain settled into a pattern, he would skip a beat, or speed up, creating a jagged, sonic itch in the center of her skull. Under the sweltering sun of the Rustlands, surrounded by sharp refuse, that sound became a torture device. Stop it. Elara finally slammed her fist in the dirt, dust pluming around her. How is this teaching me anything?
You're just annoying me!
Kylan didn't stop tapping, he didn't even look up. I am not annoying you, he said calmly, the spoon striking the glass again. Tink. I am simply making a sound. You are the one taking that sound, pulling it inside your body, and turning it into fire. Why are you doing that? Because it's irritating. Is it? Kylan paused, holding the spoon mid-air. The wind howls through the canyons. Is that irritating? The thunder cracks the sky. Do you scream at the clouds? No, you accept them as nature. But when a human makes a noise, or an insult, or a mistake, you decide it is a personal attack. You grab the arrow with your bare hands and stab yourself with it. He resumed tapping. Tink tink, don't grab the arrow, he whispered. Become the mist. Elara closed her eyes. She wanted to scream. She wanted to snatch the spoon and hurl it into the abyss. But she remembered the curtain of glass rods. They didn't fight the rock, they moved. She visualized her chest, not as a solid block of angry stone, but as a hollow chamber with open windows at the front and back. The sound came tink, and she imagined it entering the front window. Instinctively, her gut tightened to trap it, to analyze it, to judge it. No, she thought, let it go. She visualized the sound traveling through the empty room of her soul and flying out the back window, carried away by the wind, in and out, no resistance, no friction. An hour passed, then too, the sun began to dip, painting the jagged glass mountains in hues of blood orange. Kylan was still tapping, but Elara's shoulders had dropped 3 inches. Her jaw was unclamped. She realized, with a sudden jolt of clarity, that the sound was just a sound. It had no power over her unless she gave it permission to matter. You have stopped vibrating, Kylan observed, finally laying the spoon down. Elara opened her eyes. The world looked sharper, clearer. I didn't try to ignore it, she said softly. I just stopped holding onto it. Precisely, Kylan smiled, his eyes crinkling. The ego is a sticky surface, it wants to catch everything. Every look, every whisper, every slight to prove it exists. Smooth the surface. Let the world slide off. But the true test was not a silver spoon. The true test came a week later, in the form of a gilded carriage descending from the shimmering heights of Vitria. Elara was sorting through a pile of salvageable quartz when she heard the heavy crunch of wheels. She stood up, shielding her eyes. The carriage door opened and a familiar, suffocating presence stepped out. Valerius. He was accompanied by 2 guards and a scribe. He looked out of place in the Rustlands, his velvet robes dragging in the dust, a scented handkerchief pressed to his nose to block out the smell of ozone and decay. He wasn't here for her, he was here to survey the expansion of the dumping grounds. But when his eyes landed on Elara, his face twisted into a sneer of delighted malice. Well, well, Valerius laughed, the sound sharp and grating. I wondered where the rats went when we flushed the sewers. It seems they crawl here. Elara felt the old heat flare in her stomach. It was a reflex, a phantom limb of her old self. He is mocking, you heard him, but then she heard Kylan's voice in her head. The rock is the insult, be the curtain. She didn't speak. She didn't glare, she simply stood there, wiping her hands on her apron, watching him. Valerius, annoyed by her lack of recall, stepped closer. Tat, got your tongue? Or did you shatter that too? Like you did the Oculus? Do you know the council is still calculating the cost of your incompetence? You should be in prison, not scavenging like a beggar. He was close now, invading her personal space. The guards watched, waiting, knew Elara's temper. They expected the scream. Elara took a breath. She looked at Valerius, but for the first time, she didn't see a powerful high architect. She saw a man whose face was red with unnecessary exertion. She saw the sweat beading on his forehead, the frantic need in his eyes to be feared. He was vibrating with so much dissonance it was almost pitiful. He was a storm trapped in a bottle, desperate to break someone else so he wouldn't break himself. The insult, beggar, incompetence, rat, floated toward her. She visualized the windows. She let the words pass through. They hit nothing. The expansion plans are actually for the northern ridge, Elara said calmly. Her voice steady and conversational, as if he had just asked her about the weather. The ground here is too unstable for heavy loads. You'll lose your carts if you proceed this way. Valerius blinked. He looked stunned. He had thrown a grenade, and she had handed him a flower. I didn't ask for your opinion, he shouted, spit flying. You insolent child. Do you think you know better than me? I am the High Architect. He was escalating, his voice cracking. He needed her to fight back. He needed her anger to validate his own. "I know you are," Elara said, and she offered a sminuan smile. It wasn't sarcastic, it was peaceful. "And you are very good at structure. But the ground here sings a different song. I just don't want you to get hurt." The silence that followed was heavy. Valerius opened his mouth, but no words came out. His script was broken. He had no weapon against kindness. He had no defense against someone who simply played the game of conflict. His face turned a deep shade of violet. He sputtered, pointing a finger that shook violently. You think you can patronize me? I could have you arrested for loitering." "You could," Elara agreed, nodding. "But the sun is setting, Valerius. The path back to the city is treacherous in the dark. You should go before the shadows get too long." She turned her back on him. It was the ultimate power move. She didn't storm off. She simply returned to her work. She picked up a piece of quartz and began polishing it. Behind her, she heard a sound she never thought she would hear. Valerius let out a frustrated, inarticulate scream, a sound of pure, impotent rage, and kicked a pile of glass. He howled in pain as he stubbed his toe, hopping on one foot, cursing the gods, the city, and the dirt. The guards exchanged a look, struggling to suppress their laughter. The High Architect, the most feared man in the guild, looked like a petulant toddler throwing a tantrum in a sandbox. "Let's go!" Valerius shrieked at his driver, limping back to the carriage. "This place is cursed." As the carriage rumbled away, leaving a cloud of dust in its wake, Kalen emerged from behind a twisted sculpture of iron. He was eating a dried fig. "That was dangerous," the old man said, though he looked amused. "What was?" Elara asked, examining the quartz in the fading light. You reflected his own energy back at him. "Did you see? Because you offered no resistance, his anger had nowhere to land but back on himself. You broke him without lifting a finger." Elara looked at the carriage disappearing into the horizon. She felt light. For the first time in years her chest didn't hurt. The vibration was gone. "I didn't try to break him," Elara said honestly. "I just didn't let him break me." She looked down at her hands. They were scarred and dusty, but they were steady. She realized she didn't need to be a high architect or a mender or a citizen of the glass city to be valuable. She was the open channel. She was the wind. And for the first time in her life, she was invincible. Years later, legends would be told in the taverns of Vitria. They spoke of a woman in the Rustlands who could walk through storms without getting wet, who could silence a raging mob with a whisper. People traveled from the high spires to the jagged wastes, seeking the Saint of Silence, begging her to teach them the secret of her peace. She would always sit them down, hand them a silver spoon, and say the same thing. "You are building walls to keep the world out, but the walls are what trap the pain inside. Break the walls, be the wind, and watch the arrows turn into dust." There is a specific kind of freedom that comes when you realize that no one can hurt you without your consent. The world will always be loud, people will always be rude. The glass will always be fragile, but you do not have to be the glass, you can be the space between the shards. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to Daily Motivation Tales for more tales that heal the soul. Remember, the strongest person in the room is not the one making the most noise, but the one who can listen to the noise and smile.